Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye. Hey guys. Hey. Hi. Welcome again to another amazing Q&A of the filmmakers of the film Bellingcat, which is an incredible film. I'd like to welcome Hans Poole and I couldn't catch your name well.
Okay, Sasha Ulrich.
Sasha Ulrich, who's a researcher and assistant editor of the film as well as the directors of the film Influence, Richard and Diane. Hey guys.
Hey, Soko. Nice to see you again. Hi, everybody.
Nice to see you guys. How's the virtual festival been?
Virtual.
They're different. Very lonely, strangely enough.
It's very hard to get COVID-19 under these conditions, which is good. Probably good.
Is the point.
Yeah, it's crazy because I haven't seen you guys since Sundance, man.
It's been a long time. We were supposed to do a big African tour. We had big plans. We were going to be in the Central African Republic right about now, so it's kind of tragic.
And Hans, how does this virtual compare to? Because the film has been out for a while now, right? How does this feel?
Well, it's very exciting this time because I never did this before. So I like this because I stay at home and I'm always traveling. So it's very nice now. I like it.
So I think I'm going to start off with after watching the film, which is believe a really powerful film and kind of ties all our films together. And if you guys haven't had the chance, you should totally check out the film Bellingcat. I think it's going to be available for the festival, as well as Influence, which is also part of the Encounters Festival, as well as Softy, which is also part of the festival. Now, all our films kind of intersect in very interesting ways, but since Bellingcat has been out for a while, what is the state of investigative journalism right now? Basically, what's the state of truth right now?
Big question.
It's not truth anymore, and people of Bellingcat try to find out what is the truth.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Because it's a difficult question.
Yeah, I mean, if you read about Navalny and stuff, so we don't even know if he's poisoned or is he sick. Or I mean, I hope we find out someday. I have some hope now. He's in a German hospital, but it's difficult. What's the state of truth? I don't know.
What's going on?
It's kind of a perfect example of how disinformation works, right? Because, Richard and I were talking about it earlier today, and we were saying that the brazenness of what Putin has done in poisoning Andrei Navalny is kind of like Trump walking onto Fifth Avenue and shooting someone in the face. You couldn't be more obvious if you tried, and yet it's been how long? 48 hours or so since he was first poisoned, and there is so much misinformation and confusion and chaos around what happened to him. Was he poisoned? Was the poison radioactive? And those are some pretty important details that people would need to know. If that is indeed radioactive and it's true that he could be a threat to other people, then that information should be out there.
Those are the two options. Was he poisoned or was it his blood sugar? I mean,
there's that element as well.
On which information.
It's the perfect example of just how far we've come in terms of allowing this information into our systems and how deep it runs in our communication methods and platforms. That you see people having full conversations about his blood sugar levels, or it is within minutes. There's 7 or 8 different streams of information that none of which or all of which could be true. So I think it points to the fact that it's way too easy still to promote and peddle disinformation, and it just makes, I think, the work of investigative journalism all that more important. much more important to be able to kind of see these events, especially when they're in the public eye like this, as they're happening, and to really start to try to get to the bottom of it and start to be the voice of reason. The adults in the room who can actually go and say, well, we have these facts, here's the information that you need, this is how we know it, we have these two sources. You know, it's all about, I think, verifying the truth and being able to show that this is what's happening. And I think that's what Bellingcat shows so conclusively is so important, is the fact that, you know, a small team of people can make a huge difference in terms of being able to say without a shadow of a doubt, this is what happened, these are the facts, and you can take them or leave them.
There are two, let's say, two kind of truth, because there is a truth in Russia, and there's truth in the Western world, you know?
Yeah.
So if you have
exactly.
I think the way we can introduce discernment into these kinds of conversations is twofold, and I think the most important is that first of all, you cannot have corruption and information coexist. Truthful information coexist. So in societies that are manifestly corrupt, you cannot have what probably the five of us would consider truth. They can't coexist. It's impossible. You have to have corruption and disinformation. It's an inviolable marriage. The second thing is in societies that are massively inequitable, where there are huge divisions within races or within economic classes. Once again, those divisions are eminently exploitable, and truth can't exist within and can't function within those social spaces. So we're at this enormously dangerous time, Sam, when it comes to the state of investigative journalism, and even the stuff that Bellingcat was doing, where it's like laid out so clearly, this was the process, this is what happened, you can't fuck with it, frankly. Nonetheless, because these divisions are so immense and the gaps are so huge, it's very, very difficult to prove anything anymore, because the sides are so massively divergent. It's a massively dangerous time in the history of us.
So I'm kind of very curious, like, since, say, you watch the period in which Bellingcat was made and the issues that were being highlighted at the time, and influence, which is pretty new, in terms of how, in terms of the stories that it was capturing, do you think the gap between us trying to spread more truth is becoming narrower, or do you think things are becoming harder and harder? And what do you guys think what do you think are the next steps based on just what you guys have been doing? Richard, what do you think?
So don't talk.
Yeah, in 2016, we did not know we were at
When it
war.
ends, let it end. Let it be.
We had no idea the mechanisms that were functioning under the real web, the web that you and I see. We had no idea who the players were. All of this stuff was functioning in the dark. 2016 was a watershed year in terms of the information revolution. It's the year on which everything turned. We're in a new election cycle, at least in the United States this year, and there have been a number of other important elections.
Like when you hit the end.
And I think we can see that the threats that were so secretive and kind of under the radar in 2016 now are much more upfront. We at least understand that we're at war. The Russians, the North Koreans, and the Chinese, and to a much lesser extent the Chinese, all of them use effectively cluster bomb models of blasting out as much disinformation as they possibly can, most of it malevolent. They actually have no idea how these weapons are going to work. The upside is that countries like your own, Kenya, like our own South Africa, we at least know that these malevolent actors are out there, and we at least have a sense that we're under attack constantly and without respite. And I think that alone puts us in a much better position than we were 4 years ago.
What do you think, Hans?
I totally
Sorry, Dan.
But I mean, in Russia, it started, of course, and in other countries started way long before 2016. I mean, I'm Russian, and in 2016, people were completely brainwashed already. I mean, I know the international kind of war started maybe with the election of Trump, but it's, I don't know, the corruption and the hiding of truth or the seizing of doubt started, I mean, been there for centuries, but started with internet and way before 2016, I believe, yeah.
But it's strange, in Russia, the internet is completely free, you know?
Well,
so
yeah. That's what I find strange. That people that want to know the truth. There are a lot of media still online that really reporting very intensively truth. I mean, I think, and still people don't watch it. Don't go there. Don't. I mean, they don't believe that that's the truth. So they still. I mean, not the most of them, but a lot of elderly, I don't know, but still switch on their TVs. Less and less, fortunately, but yeah.
And there's something
available anymore for a large part, or North Koreans, but for Russians, still there at least. But they're just not checking in on it, or it's a little part of them, yeah.
There's something interesting that you're saying, because in our film we did capture an election, and we captured citizens being told untruths, and they would say they know it's not true, but still follow the people who are saying those things. So I'm curious, Diane, like what do you think is, like, why don't people pay more attention to what's going on, or why is there like an apathy towards doing something?
Well, so far, I think Kenya is. Oh, sorry, Sasha, did you want to say something?
Just go ahead. No, I think in Russia, I can't tell people, but in Russia, I think you have to scare people first. I mean, they are scared because there's an enemy, created or not, and then they just want to believe the I don't know, the strong leader. I mean, this is for Russian case, I think, but I don't know what they do. Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has to do, and Soko, I think Kenya is such a good example of that. Is these things cleave along political lines so much, and in a time of rising nationalism and massive divisions along political lines, where constituents are exploited with information. I think it becomes very difficult to separate political messaging from information. And Russia is the perfect example. There's no room to follow a different way of thinking, because it's very difficult to get those ways of thinking out there. The opposition it's a very dangerous place to be, and I think for supporters of a guy like Navalny, that you have to support him almost secretly or secretively, because it's just so dangerous to be able to. There's no plurality of views. There's no debate. And I think that's something that we've lost in our societies globally. If you look at so many countries around the world, it's the same thing. But there's this rise of the strongman, nationalist, populist, kind of perpetrating, understanding the power of information, which has always been, such as you say, this is not a new phenomenon. It's just so much more easily exploitable with the platforms that we all use ubiquitously every day. And so, being able to manipulate that and having the support of those platforms themselves. Facebook has done almost nothing to try to address the way that their platform is abused by various, and it's not just the Trump faction. The Democrats use it in their own way as well. But the point is that there's such a division in our countries that I think it just becomes a very, very politicized, very emotional and manipulative space, in order to kind of force people into these very narrow ways of thinking and ultimately voting. And it's difficult to know, I think, at this stage, how we get back to a place. Perhaps we never really had as much debate and as much plurality as we thought we did. But certainly right now, it does feel like it's very difficult to discuss and to have a discourse over what's important in our societies right now.
And just to latch on what Sasha said about how, like, people have to be scared first and that sort of thing. And I think that's something as a Kenyan I totally get. Do you think or do you feel that our role as filmmakers or storytellers right now is has become a lot more important, particularly since journalism is becoming more and more complicated?
That's true. It's complicated, and but I'm living in the Netherlands, and it's a totally free country, and with a free press, etc. So I can really do what I want. But I'm traveling a lot around the world and it's very difficult to do the same job when I'm in China or in Russia and I really sometimes I hate my job, because sometimes it's really dangerous what we do.
You're visible.
Mm-hmm. My God, and a lot of countries are turning right wing or with dictators, etc., with not a free press anymore. So I find my work more difficult. The last 4 years, 5 years or so.
Oh wow!
It's more important. I don't know if it's more important because I'm only doing my job. You're making a film, and it's so important to have something where you can trust on the work of a journalist. And for me, it's because I'm living in the Netherlands, so I'm reading newspapers, etc., and I can really believe those newspapers. So for me, it's so hard to understand and when everything you read is not true, or not true, not exactly true, or slightly different, or so. That's What's the job as a journalist in a free country?
I'm curious what to that question in the same breath, like to the situation in South Africa.
Sam, I think I would echo what Hans is saying. It gets tougher every day. South Africa has an enormously contested, enormously vicious media space that is very, very competitive and very, very sophisticated. We have big media conglomerates here. The space is vicious, and we compete for eyeballs in a way that is more American, I'd argue, than it would be even European. So everybody hates it when I compare South African media to American media, but it's true. Diane and I work for a smaller, scrappier, but very, very viciously competitive online outlet. So here the space is very contested, and I think we're very, very lucky because however bad things have gotten here, they haven't come after journalists yet, or not in any organized fashion. But there's a way I want to consider the question that you asked, and that is the work that we do as filmmakers is expensive. Film is an industrial art form, and the work that we do is pricey. Even the films that we made, which are barely the catering budget of a Marvel film, are still expensive pieces of work to put together. As the media space in the rest of the world starts consolidating, as the venues for documentary filmmaking, serious documentary filmmakers start to shrink. So you've still got your broadcast outlets around the world, but Netflix, Apple Plus, Disney Plus, Hulu, etc., are making concerted pushes for eyeballs. Amazon is another. These are the biggest companies in the history of mankind. They have all of the resources you can possibly imagine, and they are consolidating in ways that I believe are enormously dangerous. And so as venues start to shrink, and as the necessity for the kind of work that we produce collectively grows, I think we find ourselves in a dangerous space. And I think as filmmakers, on one hand, as Hans was saying, it gets more and more dangerous to do the kind of work that we do. On the other hand, the venues for the kind of work that we do start to shrink as well. So I think we have to fight kind of on these two fronts. The one is how to make the stuff that we make. The other is how to show the stuff that we make. And it's in that kind of confluence where I think the space is very, very contested and very, 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 very fraught at this moment in time.
But your budget film was very, very high, I think. Also, the Bellingcat film, or no, the Nicholas film. It
was for a South African film. It was probably one of the highest budgets that's kind of ever been raised for a documentary film of that length, and we were very lucky to get it. But we had a lot of traveling to do and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's another issue. And I just think such a good example of what Richard's talking about. A couple of days ago, also part of Encounters, we had a conversation with Bill Browder, who is is a financier who worked in Russia for a long time and started to fight corruption, Russian corruption. His lawyer Magnitsky was uncovered a huge government corruption scandal and tried to, be a good citizen and report it. And he was tortured for over a year and eventually killed by Russian authorities. And in the wake of that, Bill Browder architected the Magnitsky Act, which is essentially international legislation that's used to bar corrupt businessmen and oligarchs from doing business in America. And it's kind of a way of trying to hold those who are corrupt accountable in a world where there's very little accountability. And it's been enormously successful so far. He's got an incredible story to tell. I mean, it's got all of the aspects you could possibly think of. His book, Red Notice, is an incredible book. It almost doesn't even feel real. And he's been trying for 5 or 6 years to get his story made into a film. There's half of Hollywood is ready to write the script. The issue is that nobody will buy it. Not Sony, not Amazon, not Netflix. None of them will touch it because they're all too worried about being on the wrong side of Putin. And it's effectively another form of censorship. We've heard stories about films like a couple of controversial documentaries that have come out in the last few years. There was another Russian film by Alex Gibney. Richard, what was it called? Citizen K. Very important film, also about Russian corruption and disinformation. That was bought and just buried. So the algorithms are tampered with, so that even though it's on a platform, you'll never find it. And I think for filmmakers like us, all three of us, all five of us, I guess, the scary thing is if we want to continue to make politically relevant and expedient films that might piss off some big and important politicians, this is something that we need to really think about, how we go about lobbying these massive platforms who have so much power to put these stories out there and to be accountable and make sure that they are adequately dispersed and that people get to see them, because we're looking at some of the most important stories of the day and now facing censorship from the likes of Netflix. It just seems crazy, but it's happening.
And I'm curious because you're saying we need to do something. So are there like any ideas based on what you guys have been working on that you feel can be like next steps of what filmmakers and investigative journalists should do?
I mean, the solution is always fight disinformation and cowardice with information. And I think the next big push in documentary filmmaking is exactly what we're talking about right now, and that is not the right to exhibit, because I think that's a false. The right to exhibit is a false privilege. If your film is shit, then tough luck. But for solid projects of real social and political worth, I do think we need to start to expose the major exhibitors right now in ways that are quite loud, to ensure that we that this kind of cowardice, this kind of corporate cowardice, And as Diana quite rightly stated, it's a new form of censorship. It can't persist. A great example is Disney, whose big growth strategy is in China. So how do you make a documentary about the Uyghur situation in China, or anything critical of the Chinese government, that will play on Hulu? An amazing platform for documentaries, a platform that has advanced the popularity of documentaries over the last 3 or 4 years. These are real questions, and we need to start having these conversations in forums exactly like this one to push the exhibitors to understand that corporate cowardice is unacceptable. If Hans goes out with his camera and risks his ass in some of the most dangerous parts of the world, then there should be some recompense and some commensurate bravery on behalf of the exhibitors to make sure that his projects are likely.
Hans, that should happen, right?
Well, maybe for me, it's not traveling to the most dangerous parts. I'm not traveling to war zones, etc. But I don't know. It's good. I totally agree, but we have now a plan to travel to the when the COVID is over, to Russia, but it's a series for the Dutch TV, and I really ask myself. For me, it's I don't want to travel to Russia anymore. That's always I'm thinking of, because it's so hard for me to travel there with a camera. So I don't like that anymore. But the story I have to tell is very, very important, I think. But that dilemma, it's
but you're also endangering people. I mean, for example, in Russia, people just afraid now more and more to talk into camera. That we've been making this series in Russia for the last 10 years, different series, and it's getting worse and worse. In the beginning, it was people just spoke out. I mean, some people didn't even understand we were filming them with a big camera. They were thinking we were photographing them, So, but they were very open, and now they have the self-censure.
What am I doing there? Asking questions. Nobody is answering my questions. They were really afraid.
And I think something you're saying that also is very interesting and made me think about, like, with the level of work that is happening with, say, the group like Bellingcat, and some of the work that Diane and Richard have done as journalists. And I think the turnaround in the news cycle has become like lightning fast, especially we're now kind of like running against Trump's tweets. So what do you think? Like, what do you think about that? And what do you think is like, how like, is citizen journalism like the future of journalism? Like, what do you think needs to happen? Like, if from your experience with looking at how the work that Bellingcat is doing and the work that you guys are doing,
it's not the future, I think, but you can use the Bellingcat method. You can use it, So we really need professional journalists, sure, but they can use also the Bellingcat method. And when people, just ordinary people, if they want to do some research about the downing of the MH17 or so, it's good,
It's just one of the instruments, I think. But it's a very powerful instrument because, for example, friends of journalists might just try to get into to Belarus. They were stopped at the border together with 20 or more other journalists. But still, Bellingcat has been able to just use to do a lot of work with. All these phones are the eyes.
Everybody's got a phone,
So
you can all the people are filming everything.
Yeah.
And they put it on the internet.
They put on the internet, and Bellingcat is able to connect them all and really investigate that the activist was really killed, not and a grenade that exploded. I mean, you just see it, even not going there, but you see what they do, you see what happened, like you were there, like you were witnessing it really on the spot. So I think it's an amazing instrument.
But you still need really good journalists to put it all together, you know, the story behind
it. But this
it.
is the thing, is that the team at Bellingcat aren't they're not so-called citizen journalists, you know, and I'll get to that in a second, but essentially, you know, the team at Bellingcat are investigators because they are, you know, they're putting time and effort and resources into fact-checking in minute detail in a way that an investigative journalist would. And maybe the title is different, but I think citizen journalism is a misnomer that was created in my kind of, when I was coming up through journalism school and becoming a cub reporter and all that stuff and studying. I remember at my grad school, you know, I graduated 2011, and that was at the time where we were being taught that the only way to be a journalist was a backpack journalist. You had to take photographs, take video, report, and be able to tweet and, you know, do everything else and stand on your head and, you know, dress and undress all at the same time, you know, while being able to down a beer. Like, you know, that was the kind of thing that we were being told gave us value and our personal brand, and was all about your social media presence. So the message was really that, you know, and it's still true to this day, that news is broken on Twitter, and there's nothing we can do about that. That is the way that it has developed. You know, a journalist is never going to be faster than news breaking on a platform like that. But the issue is that what happens then is it splinters into 500, 1,000 different ideas and facts and misinformation. And it's really up to, I think, real journalists and dogged journalists and investigators to then go and try to figure out what of that information is necessary and important. And so I think this idea of citizen journalism kind of really put a bit of a spanner in the works for the industry, because it kind of watered down the import and the importance of journalism to democracy and to freedom. And it created this idea that anybody could be a journalist as long as you've got a phone, you can just kind of, you know, tell people what happened. But there's, as we now know, there are 100 ways that can be subverted, right? So I agree with Hans. It's you know, the journalism is important. It really, what it comes down to is, do you have the tools and the ability and the understanding of what goes into telling stories in a truthful and objective manner, to be able to give people the dispassionate information that they need. And to me, citizen journalism is not a solution; it's part of the problem.
I agree. I think it was one of those MacGuffins, Sam, that allowed, especially developing nations, and especially institutions in developing nations, very often subservient to the government of the day, to say, you know what, we don't really need resources. We just need a Muppet cell phone. You know what, and that's going to be fine. The reason the movie was made about Bellingcat is because they're extraordinary. The work that they do is investigative on another level. I can tell you right now, I've been doing this job 14 years. I cannot do what they do. Can't do it. You know, what my job is effectively going out onto the road and trying to tell stories. That's what I've been doing for the length of my career. The outfit that Diana and I are owned by is called Daily Maverick. The essential idea behind it was, we're going to start a website that does long-form journalism, only politics, only hard politics and analysis. And we're going to do it on the internet in South Africa, a country with not a particularly high literacy rate, not low, but certainly not high. A model that should never have worked. We're one of the only media outlets in Africa that are growing. I think we're the only media outlet in Africa that is growing right now. By sticking to our guns and saying, no, there is a home for long-form journalism. Our second biggest market in Africa is Kenya. Weirdly. So, you know, it's one of these things where if you stick to your guns with regard to what you're doing, and you understand the kind of long-form story that all of us are involved in, and all of us are passionate about, actually does pay a dividend, assuming you can get it to people, well, then that's the way to do things. The Bellingcat's model is extraordinary, but it links up with the larger mainframe as well. And that's why I found the film so inspiring. It's like, it is amazing to know that there are people out there that can do this. It's amazing to know that open source information can be this powerfully computed by human beings and placed together. And then people like myself, Diana, you get to storify that stuff and turn it into processable information verified by fact. To me, that places us in a position of extraordinary power against the forces of disinformation that are fighting against us every day.
Yeah. And if I may just make one more point, I'm sure all of us, when we started making our films, had a reason and a purpose for making them, obviously, otherwise why do it? But, this is a years long endeavor. In your case, Soko, it was an 8-9 year process to tell your story. So it's a real investment. But for us, the big thing was, what we said to each other was, what we want to achieve with influence is to make sure that people who work in the PR and marketing businesses are afraid after watching this film that someone will make a film like this about them if they do what somebody like Lord Tim Bell, who was the founder of our Pottinger and our main character, what he did. Because he died, and the next thing, a film comes out, and now his narrative exists in a way that he no longer has control over, and it's not a good reflection of his life. And those are the decisions, based on the decisions that he made. The film was made fairly, as were yours, fairly and dispassionately, and yet he comes up and he comes out, and at the end of the day he's left with that legacy. And so our sense was, if we can just achieve that people working in this industry will think twice before taking an account with a dodgy businessman or whatever, because somebody made a story about someone who was dishonest and terrible, frankly, then we've done our jobs, and there's nothing more that we can really achieve other than to do that. So I think we have this opportunity to crystallize important stories and big stories into this 1.5 hour or 2 hour long project that takes years and years. But at the end of the day, it's the films like that really kind of shape the narrative, because they're so, we've put so much time into them, and they're so carefully considered. It's not news, like you say, Soko, the news cycle is so quick, and before you know it, we've moved on. With film, it's there forever, right? So we have this enormous opportunity to with good intentions to really kind of cement a certain narrative and protect the truth of these bigger stories that shape our world. And I think that's an enormous privilege.
Did it all start with that interview with Lord Bell, or not? Was it the first thing you did?
Yeah, that was the first thing we did.
Was back 25 hours with Lord Bell. Yeah, we secondhand smoked 60 cigarettes a day, and listened to him try to spin us for 5 days straight. And an immensely charming man, immensely hospitable. We left our equipment in his house. He was completely charming. And while it did get testy, as I guess you see on screen, it was he was remarkably open to the experience.
Yeah, but it sounded like a confession or something like that. Because he died, or what?
Yeah, did you know he was dying, or? I was also wondering.
Yeah, he was.
I think he'd been dying since he was 45. I think when you smoke 60 packs of cigarettes when you're 12 years old, I think it had like 3 or 4 life-saving operations. So I mean, he's one of these guys that was dying.
And he was exposed to nuclear to a nuclear attack. He was in the same room as Alexander Litvinenko back in when he was dying. So I don't know if it's true, but he had a cyst. What was it, Richard? A cancerous thing removed from his neck. He said
from his neck.
That was radiation from the
poisoned by radioactive Russian waste in London. A guy
like a cat, 9 lives.
Yeah, exactly. He had a very rambunctious life. But Hans, to answer your question, I think there was an element of confessional to it. But the Errol Morris movie about Robert McNamara, The Fog of War.
Fog of War, yeah.
Where you have a very good documentary filmmaker interviewing a subject who was, first of all, smart enough, and second of all, honest enough to reckon with his legacy. Bell wasn't interested in doing that, because what Bell felt is that everyone had a right to put out the information that they wanted. In other words, all of his clients, some of whom had problems, had every right in the world to retain someone of Bell's connections and skills for 100, 150,000 pounds, whatever the cost was, and to get that information out into the wider world. How was that information disseminated? Well, first of all, it was by interacting with the media on its weak points. Its weak points being young journalists or journalists or journalists of stature willing to sit down with charming PR men, get pissed, eat amazing food at the club, and have a great night. And then that was the carrot, and then there was the stick. And the stick was the best law firms in London, Carter Ruck and Schillings. So when you have those combined effects, first of all, the charm, second of all, I'll fuck you up and kill you. It's very difficult to be a honest journalist in London in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
And just to piggyback on what you're saying in terms of like bringing it to the present day, where we're dealing with a rise of like authoritarian strong-arm leadership, and I think coming from Africa, that's like most of our leadership. And on the other end, the rise of these conglomerates, these companies that are so big and powerful. Don't you think we find ourselves in the same state where we're between the rock and the hard place to try and engage with our stories and in these spaces, in a world where a lot, if not everything, is controlled?
I think that's a powerful observation, and I think you know the answer to that question. You've worked in a country where the hammer is the only tool. And your film, which I think we should speak about a little bit, is an extraordinary contribution to a discussion of how politics is engaged in Africa. Because what we witness on screen when we watch Softy is the sheer, gross, craven, and awful manipulation of the political process. What you have
at every
is
level.
a young, scrappy political actor of complete moral repute, trying to enter a completely corrupt market and try to stay alive. His baseline is, how do I live through this campaign? That's kind of his baseline. It's towards the end of the film, as the film progresses, it's not like, how do I win? It's how do I stay alive?
How do you come out? And it's kind of the same thing I think I picked up from Bellingcat, in the sense of like the investigators were essentially trying to survive. They were like trying to keep telling the truth, but how do I continue paying my rent? How do I keep taking care of my daughter? How do I and I think that speaks lengths of the state of our work right now, right? Or what do you think, Stephanie? Sorry, Stacey. It's refused. Sasha.
Yeah, well, for Bellingcat, of course, it was a very time-consuming exercise, so they do. So the more they got into investigation, so the days became nights and nights became days. So yeah, they even didn't have time left to earn money for their basic needs, I think, at some point. So there was a very dilemma for Elliot, the founder of Bellingcat, to keep the good guys, the experts. He trained partly, of course, also himself, to keep them motivated also, or not to lose them also to other companies or other news
Christian went to
New York Times.
The New York Times.
So he loved it. So he kind of
really
not totally lost. He's still doing some investigation, but yeah, that's a big dilemma for Elliot. So he doesn't want to professionalize in that way, but at the same time, he needs to spend his time on fundings and earning money to keep this whole machine working. Yeah, for us, it's also. I mean, we're freelancers. I mean, Hans is maybe one of the most wanted directors. So maybe for him, it's quite easy to get funding and everything. But it's getting very tough, I think. Yeah, and I mean, I speak only for the Netherlands because we don't have a lot of international. Well, except for Bellingcat and this thing. But I know that the funding here is getting lower, and the politics are actually every time you have to save money, they're saving it on culture and then on films and on everything. So it's getting tougher. Yes, people. I mean, I know a lot of filmmakers that need to have few jobs or other jobs next to this job, just to be able to pay their rent. Yeah, that's. Another. So I hope the next step for us is also to create some kind of crowdfunding, but then worldwide, so that you could just pitch your ideas without the Netflix and just power to the people, but funding too.
you have an organization in Holland. I'm trying to think of the name. It's similar to Daily Maverick here in South Africa. That also runs like a membership model. Is that correct, Richard? Can you remember the name?
The commentariat,
anyway.
Yeah, and the Jay Rosen in our film, you know this.
Jay Rosen. Yeah, he was great in your film. Yeah,
he was trying to found an American branch of this, the Correspondent. It's called
the Correspondent. That's it. Yes, yeah, that's right.
Working. Yeah, it is.
That makes more sense.
So that model was inspiration for Daily Maverick as well, which is a membership model that kind of eschews subscription
paywall
in favor of and is dead against paywall in favor of free to read, but you have engaged members who are not only effectively become a community, and effectively instead of a paywall, you form a firewall. And I think that's a great model, Sasha, when you start thinking of how we can start building firewalls against the financial threats against the kind of work that we do. And you're right, it always seems like the ceiling is pushed down on our heads. As cultural producers, but not only as cultural producers, as news producers, and that is by design. That is by design. I know another market in which I've worked a lot. Canada basically doesn't have journalism outside of a few major newspapers, big conglomerates, and they've had to go to the government to sustain their funding. The model has exploded so badly that the Canadian government is effectively the standby backer of news production. Now, how on
to keep
earth
things alive
in a situation like that? So, you're right. I think digital has been an absolute nightmare. This information revolution that I was speaking about earlier, Sasha, where you quite rightly said this has been going on forever. 2016 was our annus horribilis. That was the year we either woke up and smelled the coffee, or folded and died on our backs. But I think the point I'm trying to make is these innovative models that are starting to bubble up in pockets in South Africa, in the Netherlands, here, there. I mean, you're right. We need to band together and start figuring out ways where the kind of work that we do, all three of our films can show back to back, and thematically they're completely linked.
Yes, like you genuinely do see how everything connects from the top to the bottom.
But yeah, exactly. I say the same thing. It's like, well, how do we protect our interests by being able to fund our work in ways that are innovative and that allow us a measure of protection.
So
I see there's a question here, Soko, if you want to have a look from Tolofelo Kwakwa. It's along these lines, and it might be interesting to bring that in.
I'm
Can I
trying.
read it out?
I can't. Could you read it for? Yeah, because I can't see it on my end.
Sure. So Tolofelo says, I consider the work Bellingcat does even better than what is sometimes presented in mainstream media. How does seeing Bellingcat's work challenging the norm, contradicting the information that is created and distributed, going against states and people in power, how does that inspire each of you as filmmakers? And I guess that's what we're talking about now, which is how to continue to do what, how to make sure that there's a space for our work so that we can continue to do that. And I think that, this example of the membership model that The Correspondent and Daily Maverick, for example, have been working with and seeing successes with is really an interesting one. We're speaking about essentially a social contract between citizens who understand that without truth and without the right information and without access to facts, we can't, our societies will no longer function. And those people who are trying to bring those facts to light. And so perhaps what the solution is to bring that into our work as well, and to extend that to say, maybe perhaps crowdfunding for films, although that, there's other ethical issues to take into account with that, but to create more of a social compact to say, this story, this is what we know about this story. We feel it's important to citizens for these reasons. This is how much money we need in order to tell that story. And go and just circumvent the traditional models of making films and going to, producers going to these big, powerful conglomerates who have no vested interest and really no reason to distribute and to publish our work because, it's all about the bottom line for them. To really take that contract to people who we need to, which is the people watching our films and the people in our societies who need to know what's going on. And I think there's maybe an interesting way of building out a new method of doing that.
As we wind up, I want to ask you two questions. One, I hope should be lighter, which is, what are you guys working on now? If you got so tired working on your last films and you wanted to do something that has, a couple of songs in there. And the other question is, what advice do you have for the people who are working in this field right now, the people who are trying to tell these stories in this complex, complicated space? We can start with you, Hans.
Has to be Hans. We've made one film, so.
Yeah.
Tell us, Hans, how do we get to number 2?
My God. It's so difficult to answer.
Just hang on.
Yeah, just hang on. But, I went really to a film school, etc., and I really learned the job. So for me, that was very important. I didn't start just grabbing a camera and doing just kind of film work, etc. No, I started just learning the job at school, etc. So if you want something in this
it's old-fashioned, I think. People just grab the camera right now and just make their story.
I'm very old, But, yeah.
What do you think, Sasha?
The second question, advice. Well, it's hard. I think the platform is important. I'm really thinking about now at this moment how to get away from this. We have this system from just the regular TV channels and the sponsors and the funds, and internet just pumps up lately more and more, also because of the COVID and all this, a lot of things happening on the internet right now. So, what to do? I don't know. If you have a need to tell a story, just grab any means and do it, I think.
But we said filming is very, very expensive.
But it doesn't
so you
have to
don't give money to people, they are not very
but if they can
experienced.
find the money themselves, it's you don't even have to give.
Because you made a very complicated film.
Yeah.
A lot of money, you know, the influence film, very important film. So
yeah, but there are films that are less budgets, and that's very important too. So that it just depends on the way you tell the
Okay. What are you guys working on now?
Well, he's working on yeah, this we discussed it offline, I think, but he's working. Yeah, well, maybe you can tell yourself, of course. Okay, but it's a murder case of 36 years ago in California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the guy has been imprisoned for it, and he's he always thought that he was innocent. So he's kind of doing some investigation, but not journalistic. So he's looking into all the old tapes and records and trying to find some characters that are still alive or still can not to get him out, but just to get the story. It's a kind of staircase.
It's also a story about racism because he was a black guy, you know, in 1983. So in Los Angeles. So well.
Yay. Richard.
Diane and I. First of all, the film Influence. We spent the money on wine, Hans. The film itself is just all the cash on booze.
Just use archive and then booze.
We are working on a story that effectively looks in a very weird and very different way at UN Resolution 2482, which stipulates that the links between organized crime and terrorism and corruption around the world have all but blurred into meaninglessness. And the nexus between corruption, terrorism, and organized crime is pervasive. It's global, and it is a manifest threat to our local political systems and our geopolitical systems as well. So it's a global.
Can you pitch it differently? Because that's the non-sexy pitch. The sexy pitch is basically the link between. This is. The sexy pitch is that it's ostensibly about sneakers and how counterfeit goods like sneakers are being used to fund organized crime and terrorism around the world. Hey? Ooh. Hey? That's the elevator pitch right there, Rich.
Yeah. Wow, that's something interesting.
But right? No, it's once again a big complicated story, and we got to try to learn the lessons from Influence, which is making sure that we tell the story well and get it out without getting too sucked into the rabbit hole. I'm sure Hansi you and Soko as well. There's always so many different angles and ways you can tell a story, and you have to try to kind of keep it concise, right? It's hard.
Is that the advice you give to people who are trying to hang in there?
What keep it concise?
Yeah.
Spend the budget on wine. That's
that's the best advice.
Yeah. It's crazy how, you know, I'm working on a film about I'm co-directing this film about universal basic income. Ooh.
Yes.
Nice.
The topic. Yes. Fascinating. Tell us more, Sam.
In Nairobi, I was researching a project about universal
basic.
Yeah, I've been to a village, not me, but my crew. I was. It's an experiment.
So there's a couple of experiments and stuff that's happening in Kenya, and we're trying to see if the impact of that, or you know, whether it's a solution or just another
very interesting
thing.
Wow, so that's great.
Also for the rest, like international. What? Also for the rest of the economies in the world, and
like it's connected between Kenya and the US. So
nice. So you're taking it international, Soko?
Yeah, you know, we need to more collaborations, right, in and around this space. Right. And you know, one thing, you know, I'm really sad about, you know, COVID messing around all the plans and everything, but I'm super happy that it's given us the opportunity to talk and share and engage in such a space, and you know, the privilege to meet Hans. You know, like I said, I couldn't get a ticket to watch your film, and wow, here I am now talking to you about it. So thanks so much, guys, for finding the time and being part of Encounters 2020. It's still on until the 30th of August. Check out the website, and yes, have a good night, guys.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Love you.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.